was a great ride.
It's time. Let me make sure the dial reflects the time. I don't know. Okay.
The time is 10:52 p.m. Does the dial reflect that?
It's a late night for us Cookie Pocket co-hosts, but hey, it's also the sunset of Harrison Ford's career, which we are here to discuss. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, newish film that is still in theaters. If you want to see it, you probably don't, but who knows? Directed by James Mangold, with familiar face Harrison Ford obviously leading this, but mostly new cast surrounding him, except for what basically function as extended cameos from John Rhys Davies as Salah and Karen Allen as Marion. And Steven Spielberg did not write or direct this. George Lucas did not write this. James Mangold wrote it with a few other guys and directed it. So, yeah, this is a sequel that probably very few people asked for. About 14 years or so after Crystal Skull enormously upset most of the people that saw it. And yeah, we're going to talk about it. General thoughts and ratings out of 5.
I'll go first, okay? Zach. I'll go first. Harrison Ford once said, "I've been blessed with this body." Okay? He is not too old for this, okay? Maybe he thinks so, but it doesn't come across in this. Because I think he does a pretty good job. I think he's trying his best, and I do not fault him at all. It does not feel like they forced Harrison Ford's corpse out to start doing the same scene from Raiders again with the rolling boulder. Okay, I don't think I really enjoyed this. Okay, I still have the popcorn stuck in my teeth because I just freaking saw this like 20 something minutes ago. I didn't eat popcorn, but nevertheless, I really enjoyed this, and I think one of the driving factors is the MacGuffin and whether or not it's believable, and if the progress towards it makes a lot of sense. And I feel like this is not like a Jurassic Park 3 situation where the dad from the Shameless show shows up and is like, come on, please. We're going on vacation, please. Can you go back, please? And he's like, all right. And then he regrets it instantly, okay? This is like, there's an emotional investment in this, into Waller-Bridge, and I think that there was one scene where it was too long and she was talking too much. And it was fun. But otherwise, I really enjoyed her presence in this overall. I feel like it did not feel like a James Bond thing either, where she was just replacing the main character. I felt like it was a very good, believable 2023 era tag team, and I really like that. In addition to the kid who has like a single role and he fulfills that role. So ultimately, like, I think it's safe and it's comforting the way that it ends the whole series, and I really don't have any complaints about it. Are we avoiding spoilers in this?
No, I think we're free to talk about anything, and listeners, if you weren't expecting it, spoilers. But go ahead, Mitchell.
Okay, all right. Otherwise, I think that it's hilarious watching him wake up and be old and be mad, because that's how Harrison Ford was probably every day. And I even though this is unavoidably a major cash cow, this is like an obvious milking, like anyone with two eyes can see that, right? But at the end of the day, Mangold is not Spielberg. He's not going to reach that ultimate level of cinematic prowess, and the camera work is very like muddled, especially during the chase scenes are too long, and it just the CGI is very bothersome for me. I think the CGI for the young Indy was a little bit too long for me, but overall, I think the story really makes sense. I think the third act really sticks out more than I thought it would, and I thought it was a lot less generic than I would have expected. But overall, I think it's a fun, fine, safe, like summer matinee Silent Dawn quote. Silent Dawn's a guy that I follow on Letterboxd. He said that. So Yeah, I think it's a totally safe film. I don't think it's trying to be any provocative in any way, and I think it's just a fine adventure, and I think it totally ends Indy the way that it really should have, in my opinion. 3.5 out of 5.
Okay. I think it's interesting that you mention the idea of this being a cash cow, Mitchell, because this isn't doing very well at the box office. Which is to say,
it's doing
ironically very well. But when you spend $295 million on just the production of a movie, which it's a vague rule of thumb in the industry that you double that amount to find what the movie cost after marketing. So this movie probably cost around $500 to $600 million. It's going to be or almost impossible to make all the money that you want to make in order for it to make a substantial profit. Setting the money stuff aside, though, because I've liked plenty of films that have not done well at the box office. I was not feeling this one. And it would be easy for me to fall back on my usual criticism of it doesn't have the visual stylings of what I think an Indiana Jones film is, but more than that, I think narratively, this is an Indiana Jones film that kind of doesn't hit any of the beats that make an Indiana Jones film fun or entertaining. It feels like an Indiana Jones film written by somebody who saw those first 3, I would argue maybe even those first 3.5 Indiana Jones films, and went, okay, these are fun movies, and the things that make them fun are the action and the adventure. So we need this kind of a scene, and we need this kind of a scene, and we need this kind of a scene, and it all kind of just spills over itself one after the other, and there's never really a sense of like respite or a pause between anything. All the classic Indiana Jones films, exciting things happen, but characters take a break to like be themselves between those action beats. You get the scene in Last Crusade where Indy and his dad have the talk on the Zeppelin, which is, I think, one of the best scenes in that film. And I don't think you get anything like that in this movie, because it's so interested in getting to the next action beat. Who cares what the characters are saying? Look at these mini rickshaws. They're going to race around them on Marrakesh now, or not Marrakesh, in Tangier now. Aren't you excited? And it's difficult to be excited when I don't care about the characters. I do agree with you, though, Mitchell. It was fun to see when they actually allowed Harrison Ford to seem like an old Indiana Jones, like a properly old Indiana Jones. I enjoyed it. My favorite scene in the whole movie is when he wakes up and goes and hammers on his neighbor's door with a baseball bat because they're being too loud.
Of course it is.
This sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I kind of would have really liked to see this just not really be an adventure film at all, which never would have happened. But I think the most interesting stuff in this is seeing just Indiana Jones as an old man living in a crappy apartment and teaching a class that has kind of dated to the point that he probably has a lot of students who in private go, the man can't teach, which is the case with a lot of college professors. And it was sad to see Indiana Jones as that college professor. But I think a film that earnestly investigates the concept of what happens to Adventure Man when he becomes too old to adventure, and properly just sits in the situation of, and now he's going to go get a crappy dinner at the diner, and here are the people that he hangs out with at the bar at night. I would have loved that movie. They never would have made that movie, but I think the most fun stuff in this was seeing the little snippets of what that movie might have been. So it's a 2 out of 5 for me. I did not really have fun with this. And I'm sure we'll discuss further details later in the conversation, but I did not think it was very good, and I prefer Crystal Skull.
Ugh, God. That's unacceptable, Zach.
Damn.
It's not even...
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's not even close.
That the first half of Crystal Skull is genuinely pretty good, and then the jungle chase downward is very bad. The last half of Crystal Skull is very, very bad, but I like the first half quite a bit.
I don't want to get into the weeds on that because I just... whatever. Dial of Destiny. I saw this preview Thursday because I was so locked in on seeing it as soon as I could, and I mean, most of my life I've been like the Star Wars guy. That's how I've been justifiably perceived. But in the, I guess like just over or just under 2 years ago, when I was just getting back into movies in general, you know, with this pod and through other things, I just sort of realized that I hadn't rewatched the indie movies like I did almost compulsively with the Star Wars films, but I remembered loving them when I was a kid, and you know, having an indie action figure and the little to scale truck where I could like have him like whip onto the truck and then like drive the truck, and he would be like holding on like he does in Raiders, and and I love the Lego video game, you know, all that stuff. I was super into it. So
hell yeah.
And then I rewatched the first 3 films and gave all of them 5s, and have rewatched all 3 of them again like 2 or 3 more times.
All 3 of them.
Yes, my favorite trilogy of films ever. And yeah, I genuinely view them as better than the Star Wars original trilogy, and they're now like all-time everlasting favorites of mine. So I had a lot of investment going into this. I also hate Crystal Skull. I've seen it either once or twice. I'm honestly not sure, but I didn't see it when it came out in theaters. I think I watched it when it was streaming on Paramount Plus or something a few years ago, or maybe it was after my first rewatch 2 years ago. I don't know, but I really found it despicable. But I think the reason I like this more is because it's not trying to be those first 3. It's well aware of it's well aware of the limitations of Harrison Ford's age. One of Zach, I remember you expressing this fear when we were just chatting about the film before it came out, how it could totally tank your film if when your action lead is 80 years old, and if you're asking him to do outrageous indie stuff. And there is some ridiculous, I mean, every indie film has stunts that push the merits of suspension of disbelief. I mean, I don't think anything tops the falling on the raft out of the helicopter in Temple of Doom, or the fridge in Crystal Skull. My God. And he like the whole like horse in the subway.
The truck and Raider. Yeah.
So you expect those things, but I don't think anything in this film is like, oh, he's so old, he couldn't do that. I mean, yes, there are moments where you would think that if you're being like so logical and cold, but I think to the correct extent that is brought down to Ford's age level. I agree with what Mitchell said. I think what makes this is the third act, and I was worried about this whole like time travel angle, and I'm so sick and tired of multiverse movies or time travel movies. I'm so done with them, like to the point where everybody's calling the new Spider-Verse movie like one of the greatest films ever. I like borderline disliked it. Everything Everywhere All at Once, everyone's crowning as like one of the best films ever. I think it's like fine, but I'm just so tired of the feeling that there are not permanent consequences with that. So it was refreshing to me to see that there are weird semi-original rules around how the time travel works with this artifact, the dial, and to see it not work out. They don't go where they think they're going, and It doesn't feel gimmicky to me. I can't really explain why, but it just made sense. It felt like a risk, and in my review, I said it felt like a climax that wasn't written by a test audience, which I don't know if I could say that for any Marvel or Star Wars film that's come out in the past decade, you know. So I think that's worth acknowledgement. But ultimately, it's too long. I'm totally willing to admit that it doesn't deserve to be longer than the other indie films. Mangold, I don't think anybody who has assessed this on any level is saying that Mangold is as good as Spielberg. I think that's the one thing about everybody agrees on about this film. But I will say I think he knows that, and in some cases it feels like his approach is trying to reflect the fact that indie is older, and maybe I'm reaching here, but the less astonishing camera work to me sort of mirrors the stage that indie is in his life. So I gave it a 3.5. I was wobbly throughout the film, and it's not without its issues, but I think it's sincere. I found it moving, and it looks like Ford really, really tried and really, really cares about the character, and I think that shows. So, not a lot of returning names here, like I said at the outset, but we do have another John Williams score. James Mangold said he wasn't sure if John Williams was going to score it. He said he would just write a couple themes. He's done that, like for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, he wrote one theme for Obi-Wan but didn't score the whole thing. Here, apparently, John Williams wrote one or two themes and then couldn't stop and just was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so did the score stand out to you guys? Obviously, the Raiders March is a huge aspect of the originals. What did John Williams' involvement mean to you?
Okay, so we've had the same disagreement over The Rise of Skywalker and John Williams' score there. This is a better film than Rise of Skywalker, I will say that. But
okay, good. You beat like half the letterbox there.
my issue with the John Williams score in both that film and this film, it just kind of feels like he's playing the hits at this point.
Really?
And yeah, there were a lot of places in this movie where it felt like they were just hitting the time to play the Indiana Jones theme button, where it didn't feel appropriate at all to me. It could be just as simple as he picks up his hat, and the moment isn't like triumphant at all or anything. He's just picking up his hat, and because we know the hat is a thing, it gets the score. I think this is also partially an issue with the script, but one that specifically comes to mind is the beginning of this film. We see Harrison Ford, de-aged Harrison Ford. He's getting punched up. And then we cut to Toby Jones on a train, and a Nazi who's interrogating him says, "Oh, and we know about your compatriot," and he takes the hat out of a bag, and the theme plays. And it's like, what? Are we meant to not know that Indiana Jones is there? We just spent 25 minutes with him. And in a moment like that, it feels like, all right, the score would be better used here if this was actually a reveal and we hadn't seen Indy yet or something like that. But instead, it just feels like we're playing this theme because the hat is on screen, and this is the theme for the hat just as much as the theme for the character. And I had issues like that throughout the film, where it just felt like they were hitting the nostalgia button and reshuffling the Indiana Jones letterboxed or Spotify playlist throughout. I'm not Music Man, so I'm no expert on these things, but I can't think of a single theme or beat from this movie that is memorable to me for a character or a setting in the same way that any of the themes from the first three movies are. And obviously there's bits of music that go throughout all three films that are the most memorable, but Temple of Doom has its upbeat moments attributed to characters like Willie. Last Crusade has its own individual moments. I can't think of a single thing from the score to this film that's a Dial of Destiny original theme. So that's my take on it.
I will say that, well, I disagree, Zach.
That's fine.
I disagree because I think part of what Christian was getting at in his review was that this is kind of... it's hard for me to decide what is, like, I'm just passing it because it's supposed to be like a resoluting film. Like, it's supposed to be a resolution for him. So a lot of things are old and tired by nature. And whether or not it's, like, thematically necessary, I mean, it's kind of... for the most part, I want to say that I think it's fine for it to be using Indy's past as, like, a reference point, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like none of the first three films were like, remember when he did this very often. If anything, they almost never did it, right? And they did feel like their own original movies. And I feel like this film is kind of respecting that. And I feel like John Williams even is self-aware of that fact, that this is supposed to be like a referential type film that isn't stealing at all from past films or trying to, like, resurrect the same storyline in the way like Force Awakens does with A New Hope. But I think in this way, I feel like it's a cute little beat enough where it's short enough and it's not as invasive where it's like, I think it works for the moment, and I really don't think it's overused that often. I feel like, first of all, it's a banger. It's a banger song. Everybody knows the Raiders March is amazing, right? And I think it's paced out well enough. I don't think it was really used that often, to be honest with you. And maybe I'm just not picking up on the motifs or like the references to it as much, but I don't think it was more than 5 or 6 times maybe. I really don't know, but I think it worked well with the film. I felt like I was focusing on the dialogue and it wasn't distracting from the plot very much at all, especially in the last act. I couldn't even tell you when I really heard it, except at the very last scene, obviously. But yeah, it just was not. I think it was integrated well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stunner. I side with Mitchell here, and I've seen it the least recently of the three of us. But I only remember hearing the Raiders March like 2 or 3 times even, and maybe I'm misremembering. And I remember Marion's theme was played during this like emotional scene where Crystal Skull is talked about to the fullest extent that will be allowed in this film, when he's which I think is delivered brilliantly by Ford if done sort of cursorily and by reference rather than explicit. No, I think John Williams does great work here, and though I agree that Temple of Doom and Last Crusade have their moments, like there's some real stirring stuff when Mola Ram pulls out the dude's heart, or when they encounter the Grail Knight for the first time, but I can't hum either of those moments to you. Awesome. Yeah, they're incredible.
You can't hum either of those movements?
No, I can't. I can't recall the
Sudaram, Maharam, Sudaram, Maharam. You can't hum that?
Zach loves his tribal chants, everyone. No, I literally rewatched it for the 4th time like 2 weeks ago, and I can't hum that. But they work. Okay. And I think the one original piece in this that I think works really well is there's some new theme for Mads Mikkelsen's character that I think is appropriately menacing and new, and I think that works really well. I can't remember if he gives Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character a theme. He probably does, but I don't think I found it that memorable. But I think he does what he has to do here. I don't think Raiders March is overplayed, and that was a real concern for me going into it. I was worried that I would think that it was. Okay, this film is it's a common criticism of stuff like Rise of Skywalker or the Spider-Man No Way Home to stuff it with nostalgia, often through bringing back old characters. Obviously, Toby and Andrew, like all the Force Ghost voices in Rise of Skywalker, whatever. Lando, you get the idea. But like I said, other than these extended cameos, which are nostalgia, the whole supporting cast is new here. There's no like Marcus Brody back from the dead or anything like that. We've mentioned Phoebe Waller-Bridge plays Helena Shaw. Somehow the third highest billed character is Antonio Banderas as Ronaldo, who had like 2 minutes. I really felt like they must have deleted like a lot of his stuff, because he's played like an old friend, even though he hasn't been in any of the other indie films, and his death is kind of like a big-ish moment, at least. But Hasbro made a 6-inch action figure of him and everything, but he's just like kind of barely in it. Toby Jones plays Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character's father, and we have like a crew of bad guys headed by Mads Mikkelsen. Boyd Holbrook, obligatory appearance in Logan, is playing like a southern guy who's bad.
Must shoot everything.
He takes a real step forward here, though, in that he plays menacing henchman, but he does not wear sunglasses. That's a big step for him.
Doesn't he wear normal glasses, or am I just crazy filling that in because he always does? I don't know. Maybe not.
I don't think he does.
And then, in case you forgot, Shawnette Renee Wilson has the unenviable job of playing a CIA agent that just goes up to Boyd Holbrook every 5 minutes and goes, "Hey, you, stop that!
Stop it!"
And then he does it. Anyway, lots of new supporting characters, actors. Oh, and this guy Ethan Isidore plays Teddy, the new like kid, sort of like a stand-in for Short Round. What do you guys make of these actors? Who did you find memorable? Who did you find out of place?
Thomas Kretschmann.
Yes.
He's a Nazi and pianist. He's Engelhorn in King Kong, Peter Jackson. He's one of the main people in Downfall. He's in Cars 2. He's in 2 of the Avengers. Okay. Do not undersell Thomas Kretschmann.
I did recognize him in the opening, yeah.
Okay. And Hannibal, obviously, Mads Mikkelsen, did a pretty good job. I think, if anything, the script is always holding him back. He's always ready to turn into the Hulk and eat you like Hannibal. And I think, to be honest, I think the kid was the most bothersome character for me. I feel like they're really forcing him to be used in a certain way. And I noticed this, and the good friend I watched this with noticed this also once I started pointing it out. He's the let's go guy. He's the guy that says let's go this way, and then he says it like 5 or 6 times, okay? He keeps saying we have to go somewhere, and he always knows how to go in the same direction 10 feet. And then the camera goes out and then zooms in at whatever they're doing. It's like the same repetitious thing. And I think Waller-Bridge, I think her one scene on the boat, I get what they were trying to do, and haha funny for like the first maybe 20 seconds, and then I was like, okay, I understand what's happening. She is trying to set a trap, and I'm going to see what the trap is going to be. Obviously, she's not reading the actual thing to them, so it's like you're kind of just waiting for that scene to play out. Otherwise, I think she's a really good actress. I don't think she like particularly like stands on her own. Maybe I'm not 100% sure. I feel like she's probably the strongest you can get to being a supporting character before trying to steal too much of the spotlight, in my opinion. And I also feel like that's necessary for Harrison Ford in this case, just because of his condition and it being, the end of his career. But yeah, I think the boy was probably the most bothersome, and I think besides you mentioned Renee, what's her name?
Yeah, Shawnette Renee Wilson.
Yeah, I think she was pretty much Renee Wilson. She was pretty like placeholder character. No glasses. I didn't know that. So that's pretty crazy. But yeah, shoot him, and then the Russian guy's big Russian guy. He can't be in a Nazi uniform, so they have to get rid of him somehow. Henchmen be henchmen. So I think between Mads and Waller-Bridge and Ford, I think them three have a really good back and forth, and I think they help the time a little bit, like in the long run. So
yeah, a lot of the new characters here I think are aided by the fact that they're played by actors who could read the phone book and still be at least a little bit fun. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen, that man has the sauce. So even when he has
damn straight
nothing to work with, like in like a Rogue One, he still makes something out of it because he's
could have said Doctor Strange.
Actor.
You could have said Doctor Strange. You just had to.
I forgot he was in Doctor Strange, which might be a worse reflection of that movie than of Rogue One. I mean, he's always going to find something to work with, and I think he's a very menacing character. Does it bug me that he encounters an injury that should basically be a decapitation during the first 20 minutes of this movie?
Yeah,
that was yes. Yeah, but that's not his fault.
That bugged me too. Yeah.
I mean,
he's fine.
Teddy ain't no short round. I'm going to agree that Teddy is
obviously nobody is short round.
Big drawback here. And it's so transparent that they're going for that like short round appeal, which you're never gonna get again. Like you're never gonna be able to strike gold twice on that. So I just feel like why are you even trying? I think they could have, at the very least, if they wanted a kid, they could have written him a little bit differently. I mean, his origin in regard to his relationship with Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character is almost identical to Short Rounds with Indy, which I thought was deliberate, and they were going to try and make some kind of a parallel of that, but they just don't. So I don't know if I'm ascribing credit to something the film wasn't actually going for. I do think he's the weakest link. Boyd Holbrook is a fine actor, and he does fine here, but he's basically just doing the Boyd Holbrook thing. I think I've been most impressed, I think, so far by his performance in the Sandman series on Netflix. He's actually very good in that, whereas usually he's just I am the henchman and I have a weird hand or whatever. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, great actress, even if I don't necessarily love her just playing quippy action woman. She's great in Fleabag, but she actually has something to like emotionally work with in Fleabag, which isn't really here as much. Toby Jones is a great actor. Yeah, I think the characters are great when they've cast great actors, and when they've just tried to write something original and then put somebody who's kind of vaguely popular into it, they really don't work. And I will say for the CIA agent, she's verging on totally unnecessary in this movie. I get why she's there, because the moment that Mickelson and Holbrook, or I guess Holbrook ordered by Mickelson, the moment that they kill her is meant to be they're totally off the leash now. But because we don't have any kind of a sense of their relationship to her, or her being imposing over them, or even a sense at first that they're even vaguely under her instruction, because they're constantly disobeying her. From the very moment she showed up, I was like, oh, well, they're going to shoot her. So it's not the shock that it should be.
Yeah, fair point there. I was very worried that Phoebe Waller-Bridge would bother me a lot in this. Something I've said a lot when we've discussed this before it came out. Yeah. But I thought she was terrific in this. And I'll agree with Mitchell. I think, it's a lot of people are tired of like the whole like female protagonist replacing the legacy character thing, and I don't think it's forced that way at all. And I kind of enjoyed that she's like rakish in a way that young Harrison Ford was. Like she has like a couple clips where she's like checking out attractive younger men, and I thought that was fun and played well by her. And interesting, and not like, I don't know, not like this grand like political gesture or like a girl bossy thing, but just like fun and like a way to make her own character that worked. So I enjoyed that. Toby Jones is terrific. I think those flashbacks, when as long as the camera isn't on fake Ford's face, when he's like going crazy, I thought that was like deeply upsetting, and communicated strongly by him. Pretty strong. I will just say I wasn't as bothered by Teddy as you guys were, and my mom loved Teddy. So shout out, Mom. I guess Teddy was for Stephanie Maric alone.
I guess so.
But
I can figure out 120 and then pull up the stick, Christian. Okay.
Yeah.
2 seconds.
Fair enough.
Maybe I would have been more charmed by Teddy if they'd given him more entertaining things to do. Because, okay, I hate on Teddy, but admittedly Short Round could potentially have been very annoying if he hadn't been put in amusing situations. Teddy has no, you said to stand against the wall. There's nothing like that for Teddy. I
mean, but Short Round is like, now we got to talk about Short Round. Short Round is just perfect. I mean, like every single one of Key's deliveries as Short Round is just like 1,000 out of 10. Like, and it never gets old. It plays as so sincere and so kiddish, but not like outlandish or unbelievable. It's lightning in a bottle. It's one of those perfect castings that just sometimes where everything clicks. And he's great chemistry with Harrison. Harrison seems to genuinely enjoy him. It's all terrific.
It's more than just the cast and the character with Short Round as well. Short Round isn't just there to be the kid, which I think Teddy kind of is. Short Round has an arc that directly relates to and supports Indiana Jones' arc in that film, and you can't get his progress or involvement in that movie without Short Round's involvement. It's like a finely built arch in a cathedral where everything needs to be there. And I would argue if there's an unnecessary stone in the arch of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, it's Teddy.
Yeah, fair enough. And now I need to rewatch Temple of Doom a 5th time in the span of 2 years.
Short Round is the keystone. He is the keystone.
Because he's the key to all character that we've had to get.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Zach.
True.
I think it's time to discuss the digital elephant in the room.
Okay.
Just take it away, one of you, please.
We're discussing the de-aging?
Yes, we are.
Really,
de-aging.
Oh, the de-aging
Yes.
specifically? Okay. My first reaction was, this looks pretty good.
Mhm.
I know it was from the trailer, but I purposely hadn't watched the trailer for quite a while, almost a month, basically. So I kind of like had a fresh reintroduction, and I feel like it's kind of like, it reminds me of when VR came out, right? When VR headsets came out, everyone thought it was so cool, or maybe 3D TVs, it's like a great concept, a logical conclusion, we have to bring the 360 environment, or for 3D we have to like bring the movie theater to the living room type thing, right? And then you realize that in practice it's actually pretty gimmicky, and probably not ready yet. And I feel like if you're gonna make that CGI that good, you might as well just make an Indiana Jones video game at that point, because that's what it comes across as. It is basically Grand Moff Tarkin syndrome, okay? And I think I just, at the end of it, I was like, I know they're really trying to make it necessary here, and it's a really fun scene. It's an immersive sequence in general, and it definitely lends to the plot, and it has a solid purpose to it, but it's just it's just too invasive for me. I think it just barely like crosses the line, but I think it's just like, I don't know. I know they really wanted it, but I feel like they really could have written it in a way where they didn't need the scene, which might sound like it was pretty long too.
Like
I mean, how
25
long
minutes.
was it? Like,
Yeah, it's almost 30. Yeah.
it was like 20 minutes. Yeah, like 20 something, 30. Yeah. So I think it was ultimately not very necessary. On the other hand, it was really fun. It had indie elements in it. I will agree with what Zach said earlier. This is like not gonna capture the same magic as the first three. It's not gonna have that same hearty, grounded impact that a lot of Spielberg's scenes did, and I think that's gonna be like a necessary evil, I guess, when they're trying to serve the plot. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you how to like rewrite the whole thing just not to have that whole sequence. But maybe there's camera angles you can use. But I mean, at the end of it, I just like they really were trying to show it off too much. So
Yeah, I'm gonna agree there. I think the movie didn't need that sequence. I think you could easily have had Indy say, "Your father and I found half of this hunk of useless gears on a train," and that's fine. But we've done that in previous Indiana Jones films, where Indy just goes, "Oh, I've had this previous experience with this thing 25 years ago," and just hearing Harrison Ford say that makes you intrigued by it, potentially more intrigued than you would have been by actually seeing it. Digital de-aging for me has gotten to a point. I don't like it as a practice. I'm very much of the opinion that you should let people get old and die and then let other actors get work. But outside of like a moral stance, it's gotten to a point where even if it's really good, it's just incredibly distracting to me. Because I know that Harrison Ford doesn't look like that anymore. I know that Harrison Ford, to some extent, never really looked exactly like that. And I know that footage doesn't exist. So I know that they're faking it. And it's almost like, I don't know if anybody else gets this feeling, but whenever I watch like a talent show on TV and someone is doing like a really complex, dangerous act, maybe they're like juggling chainsaws or something, or somebody shoots an arrow at somebody else, I'm not having fun with it as much as I'm sitting there and going, when is this going to fall apart? And I'm horrifically distracted by the idea of like, at some point, somebody's going to drop something, or the arrow's going to hit somebody, or something's going to go wrong, and the whole illusion is going to fall apart. And that's how I felt throughout the entire digitally de-aged portion of this film, where I was just waiting for him to turn his head a little weirdly, or for just the wrong light to shine on his face and the whole illusion to break apart. And that meant I wasn't really having fun with it. Additionally, even though he looks young, he sounds 80.
Yeah.
And they kind of tried to work an excuse into it. Like the whole second half of the de-aged portion, after he's almost been hanged, I was like, okay, he's hoarse. Sure. But he's speaking even before that. So clearly that's not the case. So it's not like they even really tried to hide it. Yeah, I think they've just gotten to a point where they're a little too confident in the de-aging, and maybe it doesn't bug some people, but I think to a lot of people, it's just really distracting and feels like showing off. Also, this is more general CG complaint than a de-aging complaint, but there's a shot toward the beginning where Indy climbs up onto the train, and then they cut to a wide while the main theme plays as he's running along the top of the train, and the camera pulls back. And the farther back the camera goes, the more cartoonish the little running Indy gets.
Yeah.
And he eventually like jumps from one train car to the other, and it looks like the poster for like Fiddler on the Roof or something, where he like throws his limbs in the air and does almost like a little oppa. I found that very funny.
It's so funny that you should single out that shot, because I noticed that too, and it did bug me as well. I'll admit it. Yeah. So when it first drops, like that first frame of de-aged Indy, I was like, wow, this looks amazing. Mm-hmm. And then the scene kept going, and then he talked, and then he turns his head a little bit, and then he's like struggling from a noose, and his head's really moving. And it's too long, and it's too much. What I will say for the opening sequence is that it's the only point in this film where there's any sort of like classic screwball indie humor, like when he gets in the car and then those Nazis like get in the car with him and like expect him to drive them somewhere. Like that was genuinely hilarious to me. My mom ate that up in the theater. And I do think it works. I'll say that I do think the de-aging works for more casual moviegoers. Like my parents thought it looked incredible. And you know, I think now we're getting into the weeds of like fan service and stuff, but I do think there's like a demographic that is not us that thought that was the best part of the movie. I agree. It was too long. They're too confident in it. In most other cases I can think of de-aging, even in big budget films, there's a lot of cutting away from that character's face or finding excuses to do a lot of over the shoulder with the real person that they're talking to. But they are very confident in just showing Indy's face a lot in that sequence. So, which in some ways credit to them, I guess. In my review, I said I think it's the best de-aging's ever looked, but it's still really distracting and not necessary.
Yeah, I think it looked better during the second flashback. It still doesn't look great, but they're not trying to make him quite as young.
Right.
So they've had to apply less CG makeup, I guess. And there's like little details that they get very, very accurate. Like during that second flashback when he's a little older, probably around like Crystal Skull age, the scar on his chin looks great. That scar that's kind of like faded as he's gotten older. But like his hairline's kind of weird. It definitely looks better than the beginning. But yeah, it's so odd to like look at, because any still frame probably looks okay, but when he's actually moving, it's like, I don't know, it's like watching a bobblehead move around.
Yeah, we can move towards final thoughts, but some, I guess, like a guiding question for final thoughts. What did you make of the overall story? It's an adventure. It's got, you know, chase scenes, whatever. But I'll elaborate on this for my final thoughts. But I think the climax, the time travel sequence, and then the way that's resolved really stood out to me and impressed me. What did you guys make of that? Or if you want to talk about the story more broadly, or any other final thoughts, please.
I really don't like the climax and the ending. Not because I think it's kind of funny that back when after they made Last Crusade, a fourth film was in development for ages, and at one point somebody asked George Lucas, who maybe isn't the best authority on these things, but they did ask George Lucas, you know, what's taken so long with the fourth one? And one of his reasons, he said, was like, well, you know, I want to come up with a really good MacGuffin to base the film around, because I think it's important to find something that has some kind of a basis in actual history and archaeology, to find something that actually existed. You know, you can't just do like a time machine or something. And I do think that one of the reasons I dislike the climax and ending to this film so much is that the Dial of Destiny lacks the mystery and the awe of the icons or the MacGuffins from the first 3 or even 4 movies. Because by the end of Dial, we know everything about the Dial of Destiny. We know exactly how it works. We know who built it. We know that a human man in, the 9th century somehow figured out this incredibly complicated thing with time fissures. And I don't like the idea of everything being so nailed down and the MacGuffin being created by an actual human just because he was a really smart guy. If you think back to all the MacGuffins from the classic Indiana Jones films, there's an element of total mystery there. God came out of a box and somehow smote all of these Nazis, and we don't know where they went, but we're not opening that box again. This rock glowed and burnt this guy's hand, and then he fell into the river and got eaten by alligators. I don't know. I'm not taking it back to a museum. This guy drank out of the wrong cup, and he turned it to dust before my eyes. I don't know, man. Leave it there. I think something that could have improved the ending of this for me, because I don't hate the idea of time travel in an Indiana Jones film, but I hate the idea that we know everything about it. Something that I think would have improved it is if the Dial of Destiny was a bootstrap paradox. For any listeners who are not familiar with the concept of a bootstrap paradox or a causality loop, the idea is that by traveling back in time, you cause something to happen, which is the reason you went back in time in the first place. So a great example would be, and this is given in Doctor Who at some point, a man is a big fan of Beethoven, so he goes back into the past to meet Beethoven, but he finds that Beethoven doesn't exist. So he goes, well, somebody has to be Beethoven, and he writes all of Beethoven's music and publishes it. And in the future, he becomes a fan of that music. So he goes back in time to meet Beethoven, but Beethoven isn't there. So he writes all of Beethoven's music. And in the future, he's inspired by that music and goes back in time, but Beethoven isn't there. So you end up in this constant loop of who actually originally wrote Beethoven's music. If the Dial of Destiny had been a case of they go into the past with the dial and Archimedes picks it up and goes, what is this thing? And then they leave it there. And so the Dial of Destiny that existed this whole time is the one that Archimedes got from the future, and he didn't actually invent anything. And so you ended up in this unexplained loop of who knows what the dial is. It's just this thing that always existed in this weird little unexplained loop of time. I think I would have liked that more than the constant explained man-made nature of this ending. That's a lot of really specific details, but that's kind of my opinions on this is why the ending didn't work for me. Maybe how it could have.
Why didn't they just make it Doctor Who? That's all I heard out of your mouth.
Yeah, come
Zachary.
on,
Okay. Bootstrap paradoxes are not unique to Doctor Who. Those have been around in like string theory for ages.
Maybe Archimedes discovered it, okay?
String theory?
Maybe he discovered whatever. It doesn't matter. The Antithekira was a real thing, Zach.
Okay, it's not a time machine, though. It's just a lump of gears.
We'll never know. But
and the Holy Grail doesn't actually grant you eternal life if you drink from it, Zach.
Yes, I know. You're confirming my point here. But that's something that's rumored about the Holy Grail.
I understand what you're saying, but I think they were trying to add a new angle to this that wasn't like, oh, it's Christianity, or oh, it's like some mythical religion. It's not like this is not really religiously minded. I feel like they wanted it to be more scientifically minded, and I can understand why you might like disagree with that as like a plot point, but I don't know. I feel like it was not really trying to strictly follow any indie beats, like you had already said. Like it's not really trying to retread the ground of let's put it in a museum thing, because then Indy kind of has his own progression with the object. Once he actually sees what it does, he has the same struggle that he kind of did at the end of The Last Crusade with the Grail, where he's like, no, we do have to save it. This is like really important, and you know, this is like history and everything. It was a funny moment, and also like, you know, but at the same time, I think at his age, he finally found a spot where he can like rest and die, seeing something that he's been studying for so long. And that's an entirely new angle. I mean, I feel like it was a really great reason for him to go back in time in the first place. And it's like the only reason really why you'd ever want Indy to be back in time as like someone who enjoys his character and enjoys Harrison Ford would be to have him be in the place where he studied for so long. And I feel like that was like a really powerful moment, like surprisingly. And I think really that's ultimately what the point of the gadget was to begin with. And I guess the origin of the gadget is more controversial, like how like Archimedes actually designed it and like how he's able to rig it so it only went back in that time. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, I guess when you're going the scientific route, there's a lot more questioning that has to be done when it comes to like, oh, it's just God. It's like the easy thing or something, you know? So I can see where you're coming from, but I feel like it served more of a purpose for Indy's character than serving like, this is the Indiana Jones MacGuffin for the plot, must be in museum, can't, you know, no one open it type thing. And I think that was an enjoyable original quote unquote aspect for me.
Yeah, as I've already said, I think the ending really makes the whole thing for me. And I guess like that paradox you were citing, Zach, would be fine, but I you know, it's been done, and I think what they do here is somewhat more original, maybe in small ways, but I was so frustrated because I truly believed for a second that the ending of the film would be Indy staying there and studying with Archimedes, and that would have really upset me. But I think it's a great moment when Helena just like punches him out, and that's it. Like you're expecting maybe some like big fight to occur, or you see them like fly into the fissure and something crazy happens or whatever. But no, he's this like younger generation is reminding him that he is loved, has a place in the real world in his own time, and that both the love he feels for other people and the way that other people care for him is still intact, despite the fact that he's not the Indy he once was. I thought that was tremendously moving, and I think the climax does communicate that theme in a pretty thoughtful way. So that's how I landed on the 3.5 instead of a 3 or even 2.5, really.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So
I guess we can move on to week in review on this.
Okay. I mean, that's the whole point. I don't want to just make this a laundry list of things I didn't like about the movie, but I also I'm going to do that. I also think this movie is lacking a good villain death. I kind of think that Mads Mikkelsen and Boyd Holbrook just crashing a plane is a little disappointing.
That's fair.
And this is a much more minor thing, but if you're trying to make this an actual ending, just let Indiana Jones leave his hat on the line. I thought that was going to be a lovely little iris out, fade to black and the hat hangs on the line. He's hung up his hat. It's still his hat. He hasn't given it to Shia LaBeouf or anything. But, you know, there it is on the line. Indy's at home now. But then he reaches out and takes it. Which he's not in a situation where he'd really.
You never know. You never know, Zach. You never know. We know how Marion can be.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Sure. I don't think that's what the film was trying to suggest, though.
At least he didn't take a whip or something. That would have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Also, he like never uses his whip in this. That's not like a complaint. That's just like
he never uses his whip in general. I think. I mean, it's kind of just a symbol by Crusade.
I mean,
oh God, please.
Let's see.
No.
Now you got me thinking. He definitely uses it to like swing on things in Temple of Doom.
Here and there.
I can. He like latches onto his dad's leg on the tank in Crusade, but maybe it felt conspicuous by its absence.
He uses it once in Raiders in combat, and then the second time to ride on the truck, and those are the only 2 times I can think in Raiders.
He uses it at the very beginning to throw me the idol, throw me the whip.
Okay, sure.
He also didn't really lose his hat too much.
Yeah, but we have the scene in Dial where he pulls out the whip and he's like, "Everybody back!" and then everyone pulls a gun on him. So
that's the one occasion, I think.
But then that also serves to illustrate how useless the whip is in any
it's
sort
time
of
to retire
situation.
It's time to retire. That's the theme right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess maybe I just kind of dislike the general theme of this film. The "it's time to retire" theme, because I don't know. I know we've established that you guys hate Crystal Skull, but I think that Crystal Skull has a bunch of problems. But at the very least, Indiana Jones at the ending of that film discovers that there's more to life than going out on these adventures. He marries the woman that he loves. He finds that he's had this son he didn't know for so long, but he resolves to start again, and he has something at home where previously he didn't. He has like this happy ending. And so, I don't know, for this film to like resurrect the franchise by murdering his son and ruining his relationship with his wife and making him a sad old man with no future in a crappy apartment, that just kind of felt mean-spirited to me and rubbed me the wrong way. And you know, what's going to happen when they have to make the next Indiana Jones film? Because they're saying they're done, but they are not going to be done. You know, they're going to kill Marion? They're going to put him in the old folks' home? I just feel like they keep, you know, putting him in more and more mean-spirited. At first, he was riding off into the sunset, and then his father and his best friend were dead, and he was married. And then his son was dead, and he was almost divorced. And what's going to happen next?
He's going to die and come back to life by another artifact. That's what's going to happen. 3.5 out of 5, Christian.
Yeah, I think it's time to move on.
Weak in these nuts.
It's time to retire.
Yeah, 2, I didn't like it, but you might.
All right.
Yeah, I think you might. I think if you like indie, you'll find something to like.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
all right.
We can review. Who's first?
I
I'll
can
go
jump
first.
in. Oh, never mind, Mitchell.
Yep, I already was in the pit before Zach jumped in. I'm gonna get out of the way. Sound of Freedom. Oh my God. Oh no.
Oh my.
He watched
really?
it. He watched the QAnon adjacent film. Oh no. He's
film?
a conspiracy theorist. Christian,
I'm taking a backseat on this one.
Sound of Freedom. Okay. I'm gonna be very simple with it. I'm not gonna say too much. I'm not gonna say. Did you just look it up?
No, I've heard of it. I know of
Okay.
it.
You know what I'm talking about. Okay. I did not rate it, and I did not review it. I don't plan on doing it, but I will say, it is a low budget movie with low budget acting, and it definitely Hollywoodifies a lot of actual events that happened, and I don't think there's an inherently propagandistic, I don't know what the word is. It's not really that much of a propaganda film. I don't see that at all. I don't really see, I mean, I can see the Christian undertones with it, and if you look at the backgrounds of the studio and the backgrounds of the actor, you can definitely see like politically where they stand and like where they're trying to take these ideas of human trafficking and things like that. And there's definitely a sense of over-exaggeration, and I think it's up to the viewer to decide how much of that is really much of a bother, or how much of that is inherently like wrong or trying to touch on a topic that shouldn't be touched on. But I think the film was trying to address human trafficking, and I think it was trying to address it by using this specific story, and they decided to use this actor, and there's a lot of very questionable choices when it comes to casting, and the script is very strange and sounds robotic sometimes, but I really think it's more of a message than it is a film made as an art form, I guess. And I think there's a whole scene after the credits, a special message that's about that. And actually the film literally is trying to give free tickets. Like, I got 2 of my tickets for free, and then at the very end it has a pay it forward thing where you pay money to buy somebody else's ticket as to contribute to that. So yeah, I enjoyed the film, and I understood what it was going for. I think the point is very obvious, and I'm not going to go out and say like, oh, it's a necessary watch. Like, you have to understand this. You have to watch this. You have to be aware of this. You can look into the actual situation and then like watch the actual footage of the raid that they portray, of the getting like the 53 kids in Colombia and stuff like that. But yeah, the film was made to convey a message about human trafficking in the U.S. That's what it was trying to do, and I can't speak on it any more than that without getting completely obliterated by someone. So I will leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I watched Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. And this was right before we recorded this episode watch. I'm probably going to keep my discussion on this one brief, because depending upon how long this season runs, we might actually watch this movie later this season. But I got impatient and I wanted to watch it. This is the last film in the Hammer Studios Frankenstein series, which we reviewed the first film of, The Curse of Frankenstein, back in either season 2 or season 3. I can't recall which off the top of my head. And Hammer's Frankenstein series is a long one. It's 7 films long. But for my money, this one might be the best of them. At least for me, is dead even with The Revenge of Frankenstein, which was the second film in the series. The central premise is that there's a young doctor, a young surgeon, who's basically a Frankenstein fanboy. He's like studied the notes of Dr. Frankenstein and tried to recreate his experiments. And as a result, he's also captured and put in a lunatic asylum where Dr. Frankenstein also happens to have been sent. But Frankenstein was sent there so many years ago that he's kind of taken control of the asylum from the inside and is basically running the place, which I think is a great premise for a Hammer Frankenstein film. Cushing really plays it in a way where you believe this kind of uptight, extremely dedicated to the details type person would end up in an asylum and go, this place is so inefficient. I could run this in a totally different way and it would work so much better. And it's got tons of fun little visual references and narrative references to the previous films in the franchise. Cushing plays it like a character who's been around for like 40 years and has so many memories of just failure after failure after failure. You can really see the weight of that in his performance. And it also features Dave Prowse, Mr. Darth Vader himself. He plays the creature in this film, which the creature doesn't look great, but I think its appearance kind of works for what this movie is going for. So those are my vague thoughts on Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. It's a 4 out of 5. I really loved it. And if we do talk about it later this season, you'll be able to hear some more details from everybody on the podcast.
Cool. Zach put me in a bad mood, so I want to talk about something I don't like. But
Zach put you in a bad mood.
Disagreements. We're back to season 1.
Oh, okay. I understand.
But
I understand. Zach,
let's
disagreements
see.
are very bad.
Yeah. But my urge to keep things current for the kids is overwhelming that caustic bitterness. So instead, I'm going to discuss Disney Pixar's Elemental.
Oh my God.
Which is still in theaters, probably, I think.
Let's check.
Yeah, I saw this in a theater. Just me and my mom seeing the Pixar film,
Oh, yeah.
as one does.
It is.
And it's not doing well. It's not making Pixar money, and it's getting mixed reviews. But I thought it was pretty good. I landed on a 3.5, and most of that comes from the visual appeal. This is kind of something we take for granted now, and I've said similar things about the relative visuals of something like the sequel trilogy compared to like a Marvel film or the Dial of Destiny, for that matter. I think it's worthwhile to point out when these visuals are fully realized and engaging, and at least in that department, I don't think Pixar has ever lost its step. Everything looks really, really gorgeous here. But what's working against Elemental is its release date and its thematic proximity to other films like Zootopia and any sort of like fish out of water or racism allegory more directly. But I think that this is executed very well and examines the issue in a way that those other films don't necessarily. There's this big opening sequence when Ember's parents, Ember being the fire girl, obviously, when her parents are moving to like the Element version of New York City or whatever, and they're like excluded from most of their attempts at housing. So to me, that was kind of like a vague reference to redlining or something that's like, a substantive, real measure of racism in the real world. So to me, that was thoughtful, or at least engaging in a way that these other films don't always reach that far. But beyond that, I thought the performances were really charming. Most of these actors are pretty fresh faces or even no names. Leah Lewis, who played Ember, has only been in the Netflix film The Half of It and Fred 3, Camp Fred. Yes.
And with John Cena. Oh, they all have John Cena.
Yes, which Mitchell has discussed in one of our episodes, I think, and we can review.
My best reviews.
And the actor that plays her father, Ronnie Del Carmen, is not really a trained actor. He's been working as an animator at Disney for decades, but I think he turns in a really sensitive and impressive performance. Especially, I had no idea that he wasn't like a trained or experienced actor when viewing the film. Yeah, and it just has a lot of heart, and it's the closest Pixar gets to like it is a romantic comedy. It just is, and I enjoyed that, and I think it just explores that theme in a way. West Side Story will always be iconic, but I think its moral message has sort of begun to lose its novelty at this point, and I think this film has something to say, and I think it does so in an entertaining way, and made me feel something. And is original enough to not be a Toy Story 5, and I think that's worth celebrating to some extent. I really do. So 3.5. If you like animated films, I would give it a try.
Elemental isn't a musical, though, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay. Speaking of Toy Story 5, there's a great man carrying thing video that came out after Elemental bombed.
It was good.
They hit the Toy Story button. Yeah, I guess that brings me to the Marvelous Cinemator. And this will actually be the first episode that the way that it's coming out at least, this will be the first episode that you, our audience, are hearing, which we have recorded out of order. So in future weeks, you will hear what I think of the films between the last film I talked about and this one. But right now, I am talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Oh, no.
Have no fear.
Nice.
I will give you my opinion on the other films in the coming weeks in no particular order. But Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Something I pointed out in my Letterboxd review for this film was that I think a writer on this film, when it was in the Marvel press tour, they said that it was Jodorowsky's Dune within the Marvel universe. For those who don't know, Alejandro Jodorowsky is this borderline insane experimental Spanish filmmaker, and in the 60s and 70s, he was going to make an adaptation of Dune, that it was going to be 14 hours long. It was going to be full of all these insane visuals, including at one point an extreme wide shot of a desert full of people defecating into clay pots. Just these entirely out there, nonsensical visuals barely held together by a narrative of some kind. That's not Quantumania. Some of the designs are a little... some of the character designs and location designs are kind of intriguing. But you can barely see them through the kind of smoky haze of the Quantiverse, the multiverse, the nanoverse, the small place.
The quantum realm, Zach.
The quantum realm. There we go.
The weird world within.
And for the most part, the movie doesn't really do anything all that substantive or that substantial with this new location. I mean, it's very small, but it doesn't really matter that it's very small. It could be another planet. And it doesn't really have an impact upon our characters' abilities to make themselves bigger and smaller. There's one sequence that kind of does, and that's when Ant-Man gets stuck in like the recursion loop, where his every action like splits off into a new version of him. That was kind of the one sequence in the film where I thought, okay, they're kind of doing something with the rules of this dimension that impacts his powers, and that's a little interesting. But yeah, for the most part, the setting does not complement Ant-Man as a character at all. And I will be more than off the bus by the time that Kang gets paid off, and he might be played by a totally different actor when we get to that point. But what I will say is that, from what I understand, Kang is meant to be the next Thanos. So it seems extremely counterintuitive to make him the big, powerful villain in a movie where he gets beaten up by a bunch of ants. I know there's multiple Kangs across multiple dimensions, and they learn from each other's mistakes, but I just feel like he's not going to feel like that much of a threat when you get to the Kang dynasty, and Kang has already been beaten by Ant-Man, Loki, Squirrel Girl, and Arm Fall Off Boy. It's the effect is going to have been diluted. If when we got to Infinity War, we had already seen Thanos get smoked by Hawkeye, we would not be as threatened by Thanos in that film as we are. So who knows? Perhaps it'll be one of you guys in a few years letting me know if this happened, if this went as badly as I expected it to. But yeah, I certainly don't think they're pumping up their lead villain by having him appear as a lead villain this early on. So yeah, it's a 2 out of 5 from me for Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Too high.
Quantumania. Yeah, I mean, I see. This is the thing. It wasn't amusingly bad. 2 out of 5 in a lot of ways is kind of worse for me than a 1 out of 5, because a 1 indicates at least that it had. A 1 is like, there are a lot of good ideas here, and it just does everything wrong with them. A 2 out of 5 is either poor or you bored me, and Quantumania mostly just bored me. Despite the jangling keys of a Bill Murray who shows up for one scene.
Oh,
and
he's like the best thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
He never even gets paid off on.
I'll make sure to look that scene up and still not watch this movie.
Yeah, it's oof. So at this point, what will I be talking about next time? I think it'll be Guardians 3.
Oh my gosh.
That will be in a while, probably, for you guys. You guys, the audience, you are going to be able to, go back and listen to my thoughts on Black Panther Wakanda Forever and the other one that I've forgotten. You'll have those over the next few weeks. And then there may even be a few episodes after that before I actually get to talk about Guardians, because I'm waiting until it comes out either on Disney Plus or at my local library. So until then, enjoy the other reviews, and the marvelous Cinema Tour will return in another episode.
Okay.
It will return.
My goodness.
Bum-ba-da.
Yeah. Well, now
Hang on for the mystery tour.
Christian has to run. He's running right now.
I'm
Can't
running.
see him with the camera. He's on the train. He's in
pumping my arms.
young CGI Christian, 12-year-old Christian in his Jango Fett Halloween costume, running for some candy. I'm wearing my Indiana Jones costume because I was Indiana Jones one year. That was a very specific reference.
Oh, I should have worn my hat, because I do have an Indiana Jones hat from when I was like 8.
Zach's 8-year-old Indiana Jones hat. Run down 60 seconds. Christian answers with the ratings somehow. Internet connection. Okay. Zach starts. Do the time.
Oh, I'm starting.
Yep.
Okay. In 3, 2, 1.
Oh no.
The Wrath of C.G. Tarkin.
2 out of 5.
Carpet bomb.
3 out of 5.
The Magical Mystery Tour.
3 out of 5.
Sympathy for the devil.
2 out of 5.
Overhead Projectors.
3 out of 5.
Retirement.
3 out of 5.
Moon Day.
3 out of 5.
Room service.
4 out of 5.
Tiny Forehead Scar.
3 out of 5.
A taxi driver.
3 out of 5.
Hi, John Rhys Davies.
3 out of 5.
By John Rhys Davies.
2 out of 5.
Hold My Horse.
3 out of 5.
Moroccan chewing gum.
3 out of 5.
Hi, Antonio Banderas.
4 out of 5.
By Antonio Banderas.
2 out of 5.
Eels.
2 out of 5.
3 minutes.
3 out of 5.
Tourism.
3 out of 5.
A big guy with Indiana Jones does not fight.
3 out of 5.
Time is up.
Wow.
I feel like there was a lot left there.
Not a lot. Not a lot.
Okay.
Some.
A chunk, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not enough for a 6th indie film, but nevertheless.
No, we're done. Who's previewing our next one now?
Oh no.
It will be Mitchell
Oh, no.
and oh no, there's a hard drive on top of my next
Oh, no.
page.
That's not why I'm saying oh no.
Zach's
Oh.
consulting the archives, everyone.
I am consulting the archives. Yes, we've already recorded this episode in a certain German prison camp.
Oh,
I'm previewing.
Yes. This one is going out
exit.
this Friday.
Yeah. The magnificent exit. The Great Escape with Steve McQueen and a bunch of British people that's, very famous at one point. And Richard Attenborough and gang. And they try to leave. It's a massive escape movie. It's kind of like the most well-known, pretty much, escape movie, I would say, especially war escape movie. So if you want to see our 13th endeavor in World War II, tune in next time.
Mm-hmm. Like
Other than
Chicken
that-
Run with people
Exactly. And a motorcycle.
and a motorcycle.
Excellent. Right on.
All right.
And Indiana Jones, I'm sure, owes a lot to The Great Escape, so it's kind of a nice pseudo
True.
connect there.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for listening. This has been Cookie Pocket, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.